Hey kids, I am back with the last two chapters of What Was the Gold Rush book. We are on chapter 9, Mining Gets Harder. A few years after the strike at Sutter's sawmill, the easy gold was gone. Most miners weren't finding enough to pay for food and supplies. There were still plenty of gold deposits in California. The problem was that they were hidden. The gold was wedged deep inside mountains or underground. Hard rock, usually quartz, with gold veins is called ore. Miners began tunneling for ore. They dug into rocky hillsides using shovels, picks, and drills. There was a lot of guesswork involved. Some tried to locate veins of gold by using magic. They wore necklaces with charms that were said to be gold nuggets. They also tried using forked tree branches called divining rods. They believed the branches would twitch when gold was near. Thousands of miles of tunnels were dug and blasted with dynamite. Miners would go hundreds or even thousands of feet down a tunnel opening in a rickety elevator. Working deep inside the tunnel, they filled buckets or ore cars with rock. Then they hauled the rock outside. The ceiling of a tunnel was supported by wooden beams. Sometimes these broke or fell over. Then there would then then there would be a cave-in. Some miners got buried alive. Explosions and poisonous gases in the tunnel could kill miners too. To get the gold out of the ore, the rock had to be crushed. A machine with huge hammers called a stamp pounded the ore to dust. Then the gold dust was separated from the rock dust. A chemical called mercury was used in this process. Back then, miners called it quicksilver. They didn't know it was poisonous. When they heated it to separate the gold, it produced a vapor that could make them very sick. This kind of mining turned out to be very profitable. Didn't turn out to be very profitable. Even worse, it hurt the environment. Mercury got washed into streams where it killed fish and other wildlife. A new faster way of mining was called hydraulic mining began. Miners aimed high-pressured water hoses at hillsides. The powerful jets of the water hit the base of the hills hard. They ate away at the dirt that supported the top of the hill. Once the bottom was worn away, the top crashed down in the landslide. Hills tumbled down into piles of gravel. Huge trees were swept away in the downward rush of dirt and rock. Meadows and valleys below were buried. Farmland was destroyed. Farmers and other people protested. Eventually, laws were made to protect the land. Dredge mining was another quick mining method. Machines called dredges scooped gravel from the bottoms of deep lakes and rivers. Only big companies could buy the large, costly equipment. Instead of working for themselves, many miners worked for the companies. They got paid by the day. It became impossible for them to strike it rich. Any gold they found belonged to the company. Some 49ers left California. They went to try their luck at the silver mining in Nevada's Comstock Lode. Lode. Many gave up and headed back east. The westward rush for gold slowed down. Boom towns spring up when something brings people there in a hurry, like a discovery of gold or oil. But if the gold or oil runs out, the town can die off. Some mining camps survived. Hangtown grew into the city of Placerville. Others, like Bidwell's Bar, became ghost towns. Saloons, banks, and hotels that had been wildly busy were suddenly empty. Grass began to grow between the slats of the wooden sidewalks. Wind and rain eventually knocked over tents and buildings. After a while, it was like the town had never existed. Some ghost towns are now tourist sites. Chapter 10: How the Gold Rush Changed America. With amazing speed, the gold rush sent settlers westward. When James Marshall first found gold at the lumber mill, only 30,000 people lived in California. 12 years later, the population had swelled to 380,000. All those people needed to eat. Farms and ranches sprang up all around California. Gold made California important to the United States. Only about 30 months after the Mexican-American War ended, California became a state. This happened far sooner than it might have without the gold rush. Because of the gold rush, people came to California from all over the world. They added to the culture of the United States and played an important part in great events. For instance, Chinese workers helped build Transcontinental Railroad of 1869. It went from Nebraska to California. After it opened, the trip west only took 1 week. Thousands of westbound gold seekers passed through Missouri. There some saw slave auctions for the first time. It turned many against the idea of slavery. The gold rush was a disaster for Native Americans. In 1848, there were 150,000 Native Americans in California. 12 years later, there were only 30,000. Some had been pushed out to make way for settlers. Others had been murdered or had died from hunger or disease. Native Americans had lived on the land first, but because of westward expansion, they lost their way of life. The two men who started it were all ruined by the gold rush. James Marshall managed to get by doing doing odd jobs. He also would sign autographs as souvenirs. He died in a small, poor cabin. John Sutter lost most of his fortune. There would be other gold rushes in America. They'd happen in other states such as Arizona, Montana, and in other places like Australia, South Africa, Wales, and Scotland. But the California gold rush was one of a kind. It didn't just change California, it changed the United States forever. Now the country reached from the Atlantic to the Pacific, or as the song America the Beautiful says, from sea to shining sea. The gold rush had lasted more than 5 years. Most prospectors who came never got rich, but they had seen amazing sights and been part of a great adventure. They would never forget the good, bad, thrilling days of the California gold rush.